Good morning again, and thank you all for coming. It's just so exciting to see the room full. I hoped it would be. I have a real great privilege this morning of introducing one of our own, a great civil engineer who I haven't known very long, but so impressive, huge heart, great competency, and we're just really fortunate that he is here with us today. And so I really appreciate that you were able to break away. We have some other staff that was on a DCO that will probably be coming in a little late. We're sorry about that, but they wanted to join us too. When Colonel Mickey Addison said that he might have an opportunity to come talk to us about things that he sees in his AOR over in Hawaii at PACAF, we were really excited to have that conversation because we've been working really hard on AFCEC 2.0 and what we should be about as we roll into the INSC. And all of those discussions need to be informed by people who have first-hand knowledge of what it means to be in a different AOR than the one that we're in here. And so he spent some time with us this morning helping us understand that. And then we have some other meetings later in the day. So during his visit, though, he was able to carve out some time to have a discussion with us about leadership. Colonel Addison has written and has been published a great deal. And one of those books that he published, 100% of the proceeds from that book go to wounded warriors. And it's called Leaders Leading Leaders. And it's just a great, he sent me a copy of it and I read it right away and I've been passing it around. But leading leaders by inspiring, empowering, and motivating teams. What perfect timing for us to be reading that because of all the change that we're going through right now and a lot of unknown. And so to manage expectations and to be able to roll together as we lead the way as engineers, it's really good to think about how leaders lead other leaders and what leadership and followership means to all of us. He's also written about presence is the heart of leadership, which I thought was incredible. Founder and owner of Lead the Way Media. Are we surprised about that? No. He's been an engineer since 1987 and was a commander of the 10th Mission Support Group at the Academy when I was at NORAD Northcom, and I was saddened that I didn't know that. So we were in the same zip code, didn't even know it. And then Deputy Director of Basing at the Pentagon, he survived that. He was at Barksdale, maybe I should say that he survived that to Barksdale, right? As a commander of the 2nd CE Squadron in Kuwait with the 32nd Expeditionary CE Squadron. And then he was at Kelly, started out at Kelly, I guess, and which is where you are today. So as a flight chief and later as commander of the 6968th Alteration Installation Squadron. Has anybody ever heard of that before? And so I think that you always say the best to last, right? He's a Texas A&M grad, so he's an Aggie. Oh my goodness. Actually, I think I may have you sit on one side.
Have a friendly crowd, that's great.
So engineers, give a real warm welcome to the person who's over at A4/7D at PACAF, but the new news is that he will be the deck commander for the debt over at PACAF. So, and he will be, they stand up on 9 April for their activation ceremony. So I guess this is the first time that we'll hear from a deck commander. So it's exciting to have you, Mickey. We're so glad you're here.
So I'm going to try not to abuse the speakers there or your ears. So if it gets too bad, I'll just put it down. I've never had trouble being heard in the back of the room. So the audio is all through here though, right? There's no way to do okay. Well, so first of all, Dr. Coach, thank you for the invitation to speak, and I really appreciate everybody showing up. I had a great leadership coach and teacher when I was at, now called the Eisenhower School, ICAF, Dr. Mark Wood, and he used to begin every class with thanks for showing up. So thanks for showing up. I'm going to ask you a question at the end of this, and so there will be a pop quiz at the end, and it's going to start something like this. Who do you want to be as a leader? I'm going to tell you who I think I want to be and who I try to be as a leader, and that's what this Leading Leaders is about. The subtitle is about teams, because as leaders, we don't do anything by ourselves. Our purpose as leaders is to lead, inspire, and motivate people to do things, to do teams. So I'm going to walk you through my leadership philosophy. I've had the great privilege in our Air Force to command 3 squadrons in a group, and then I get a chance again to command the detachment as my probably my last assignment in the Air Force. And so I think command is one of the greatest things ever, but it's only one leadership job out of many, and we all have the opportunity to lead both our peers, sometimes we lead our bosses, and certainly those that work with us and for us. So, all right, so next slide, please. All right, so this is, that is my leadership philosophy. 5 tenets: integrity, respect, teamwork, leaders lead, and little things matter. And I'll walk you through each one of those. All right, next, please. There's St. Tom Landry, some of you who are Cowboy fans will refer to him. For those, and I say, is everybody here a Texan or displaced? No, not. They've got a few. Most of the heads are going north and south. So the ones that are going east and west, y'all want to be Texans, I know. But I grew up. Maybe there's one that doesn't. I grew up here in Fort Worth. And I went to school at Texas A&M, and you know, you can take the boy out of Texas, but you can't take Texas out of the boy. And so I do have love everywhere that I've lived. And I've enjoyed traveling the world and living in, across this great country and met some wonderful people. But my heart, as much as I love Hawaii, my heart's always been here. And in Texas, you know, we only have 2 sports: football and spring football. And so Tom Landry was, you know, one of my, I think, if you haven't read his story, his book is hard to find. His autobiography is very interesting. He was a B-17 pilot in World War II, U.S. Air Force captain. Saw combat, and then he came back, worked for the New York Giants as a player, and then later as a coach, and then he was blessed to be the coach of the Dallas Cowboys, the first one, and in all caps, the only coach the Cowboys ever had until '92. And I think what happened to him, when the way he exited was not the way that we would have chosen for him, but that speech came out of his book. I mean, that quote came out of his book. And he said, "The art of leadership is getting people to do what they don't want to do in order to achieve what they want to achieve." And to me, that is the essence of what leadership's about, right? Because every task that we have to do as leaders and as teams sometimes, usually, involves things that we don't want to do. Some things are uncomfortable. We have to work hard, or we have to work late, or they're tasks that are unpleasant. And then the art of leadership is to motivate people and motivate yourself as a leader to inspire people to greatness despite maybe the unpleasantness of those tasks. All right, next please. And so when you take those 5 points of leadership and then you marry those things up with our goals as leaders, as relationship builders, as task doers, that's where they map out. So respect and leaders lead, that's understanding the relationship between the leader and the follower. That's understanding that leading people is about leading people, not accomplishing a task. And as engineers, we love our spreadsheets. We love to be able to plug numbers in and do math and get an answer. Here's the answer. But we sometimes forget as engineers that our purpose in life is to build things for human beings to use and do. And so that's what leaders do. Leaders take the task that we're doing and make it applicable to the human beings that we work and serve and work for. The second one is understanding the ethics and character. And this really is the foundation of leadership, right? Because if we don't have good character, if we don't start with a foundation of integrity, then we're gonna make decisions later that are gonna let other people down and compromise ourselves. And the last one is understanding the teams within teams. We had a great chief of staff in General John Jumper a few years ago, and he used to talk about teams within teams, and that's where I borrowed that phrase. You know, there is room for individual achievement, and we should celebrate that, but we should never forget that we have teammates, and sometimes we have teammates that we don't realize we have. I'll talk about that. I'll give you a great story about that later. So that's where those things line up. All right, next. Now I call them bricks, by the way, because I'm an engineer, and so we have a cornerstone, integrity, and then total of 5 bricks, but four bricks to build on top of that cornerstone in my leadership philosophy. That's why you're going to see bricks in the top right-hand corner up there. So who's ever heard the term common operating picture? All right, great. So a few of you. So if you haven't heard that term, what common operating picture is it's the view of the battle space that a commander has and shares with everybody that's involved in that battle space. So it's called a common operating picture because It's common across everybody who's in there, everybody who needs to see it, and it's common across the whole domain, air, space, sea, and cyber. So I've kind of adopted that idea for leadership. And those are the three things that I think are important that the leader then has to integrate in the common operating picture of leadership. Because if you're leading yourself, and you're yourself alone, well then you're just going to end up being a one-person team, and that's not going to get you anywhere. So what are the three problems that a leader has to solve? Well, first of all, they have to solve the personal issues and the personal needs of the team. Because as a leader, you deal with human beings. And so you have to understand, what does that person need? What do they feel? What feeds them as a human being? What can I give them as a leader? What can the organization give them? What can their teammates give them? The second thing you have to solve is, what does the organization need, right? And we do that in the Air Force with our core values, for example. I'll talk about that some more in integrity. But what does the organization need? What do I have to do as a unit, as a group, as a team, to feed what the organization needs? And then what does the task that I've been asked to do need? Right? And this is with the engineers, that's where we live. We live there. We love that part, because I can plug that into a spreadsheet, and I can do a flow chart, and I can figure that out, and I can hand a piece of paper in and done. So we have to figure out, we have to integrate all those things. And so the sweet spot's right there in the middle. The task, the mission, the needs of the organization, and the needs of the individuals on the teams. And if we can integrate all that and find that sweet spot, then we're truly leading people. All right, next slide, please. So I'm going to start off with integrity, and you got to have a good Winston Churchill quote. All right, everybody loves Winston Churchill. So how many of y'all heard this one? We've been saying it a lot in our Air Force. Not the one that's up on the chart, the one I'm about to tell you. That gentlemen, we are out of money. We must think. Right? I probably misquoted him a little bit there, but that So we all love Winston Churchill. He's good for some good quotes, and I love that one. Character is manifested not in the great times, but in the small ones. Ronald Reagan had another great quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it because it's really lengthy. But Ronald Reagan's quote at the Citadel that he wrote in '82 was that character's not built in the big moments. We don't rise to the occasion if we haven't built the foundation to begin with. And we build character in the little decisions that we make every day. And that's integrity. We can't be somebody on Sunday morning and somebody else on Monday morning. We have to be the same person. So the word integrity comes from a Latin root word. My mother was an English teacher. I'm going to use a lot of Latin today. My mother was an English teacher, and so Latin there's a lot of Latin root words in our English language, and integrity is one of them. Ingratitatum is the word in Latin, and it means to be unified, to be of one person, to be of the same person on Monday morning that you were on Sunday morning, and not two-faced. And so if you're a person of integrity, what you see is what you get. You don't have to remember what you told the guy last week, because it's the same thing that you're going to tell him this week. All right? So being a person of integrity is somebody who is always making the same decisions based on your value and your value system, and it's consistent. That's really important. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide so I can walk you through my takeaways. So we do that, we codify that in integrity. There's a couple of aspects of integrity I want to talk about. So we codify integrity in our organizational values. We say what integrity looks like. So if you're an engineer or a lawyer or a physician, you have a professional code of ethics. First, do no harm, the Hippocratic Oath, one of the very first codified codes of ethics ever. It's the oldest oath for a profession on the planet. The engineers, National Society of Professional Engineers, has a system of ethics, right? We're going to serve the public good. We're going to minimize safety. We're going to work economically. The military academies and colleges have codes of honor. So the Aggie Code of Honor is an Aggie will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. Sounds a lot like the United States Military Academy's Code of Honor. Very similar to the Air Force Academy's honor code. Right? The Naval Academy has got an honor code as well. It's a little lengthier, and it talks about, a midshipman will be a person of integrity, will do this, will do that. It's not confined to the military either. Other academic institutions have honor codes. Princeton, Yale, Virginia Tech, where my son goes to school. So and codes of honor are meant to give us, honor codes of professional ethics are meant to give us a systemized, written approach of what the institution values, how the institution defines integrity. So the Air Force writ large, how do we define integrity? We define it as being in confluence with law. We define it as being in confluence with the core values of integrity, right? It's the very first one. And so these codes of honor are our way as a society of saying, this is what integrity looks like. And I think that's valuable. I think that's part of what integrity looks like. President Reagan talked about the other part of what integrity looks like, right? Where integrity is who you are as a human being, that you're always the same person all the time, that you don't have to remember the lie that you told last week, that's what integrity looks like as well. And it's really both and. So let me walk you through some of these takeaways, right? What do you do as a leader with a breach of integrity? You have to address it immediately. Because it's like mildew. The whole place is going to stink, right? If you take care of mildew immediately, you get done, you smell, your bathroom smells like bleach. If you don't take care of it, your shower looks pretty green and it's kind of stinky. And so pretty soon a breach of integrity will stink up the place. And believe me, if you think nobody notices, they do. And how does it do that? It's a breach of trust. If I can't trust my teammate not to eat my lunch out of the refrigerator, then how can I trust them to have my back when it comes to going into an important meeting or helping me prepare for a project or going into combat alongside of them in the case of the uniforms? Integrity has got to be something that we live and demand of each other, and especially as leaders, you have to set the example. You have to be the model of integrity. And I know as we get more senior in rank, both in the military and the civilian side, we learn this. And the sooner you learn that you're always on parade, whether you're a GS-1 or an SES 1.5 million, all right, there's always somebody looking. And every time in our Air Force and in the public eye that you've ever seen anybody suffer from a breach of integrity, personal loss, it's usually because they were living a double life and they thought nobody would notice. So integrity has got to be our watchword. So you have to one last comment about integrity, and that is, if it's not who you are as a person, you really can't be a leader and you really can't be a follower. So I think everybody learns. I think culturally as we grow up, we all learn you don't steal, you don't lie, but sometimes the pressures of our job makes us want to compromise our integrity. And there's ways to get the job done without compromising your integrity, and that requires honest communication. Hey, I don't think I can do that because of this. And that's where you're leading your boss. If your boss ever asks you to do something that violates your conscience, then you need to go to your boss and say, hey, I can't do X, Y, or Z because I feel A, B, or C. And if your boss is a person of integrity, then they can say, oh, well, let me help you remove these barriers so that we can get the mission done, get to that sweet spot without either one of us compromising our integrity. And lastly, remember that it's built on, just like President Reagan said, it's built on the small aspects. Do you sign off on the form, or do you actually do the inspection? Do you just check the box, or do you do the training? Do you attend the meeting, or do you blow it off, right? Or do you call the people and say, hey, I can't be at your meeting? So be the same person on Monday morning that you were on Sunday morning. All right, next please. This is Malcolm Forbes. I'm going to talk about respect next. And I think that's probably one of the best quotes about respect. I've used it several times. Malcolm Forbes, you might know, the industrialist, founder of Forbes magazine. And he says that respect, you can tell a lot about a person by how they treat people that can do nothing for them or nothing to them. So we were talking just a little while ago about, I read an online blog post about how flight attendants are treated by the general public. So why are flight attendants there? They're there to protect us in case of an emergency, and God forbid we should ever have one, but that's really why they're there. They're not there, and they are there to make sure that we're comfortable and that the company image is that we're here to serve you as a customer service person. But expand that outside of flight attendants. Think about every service person that you meet. And you are meeting them for the first time. but you are their, 100th face they're going to talk to that day. How do you treat them? Are you demanding, requiring them to meet your whim, requiring them to come to you and do what it is that to serve you? Or are you entering into a partnership with the company through this person for them to deliver a service and you to be there, be a good customer? The latter example is showing that person, that company, respect. The former is demanding respect without returning it. So I think we would all agree that it's better, the latter example is much better than the former example. Next slide, please. Let me walk you through these takeaways about respect. First and foremost, people earn respect because they're human beings. You have to start there. If you don't start there, then every relationship becomes about power. So it doesn't matter what rank somebody is, how much money they make, what their race, religion, national origin, whatever. None of that matters. The fact that somebody is a living, walking around human being means they deserve respect. Now here in Texas, when we grew up, we say yes sir and yes ma'am, don't we? That's kind of a cultural way of showing respect. Now you can say that, you can say yes sir and yes ma'am in a way that's disrespectful. It's got to come from the heart. But you have to see other people as human beings that deserve your respect because they exist. You have to start there. All right, secondly, you earn respect, don't you? So you earn respect by how you act. So I don't have to agree with everything that comes out of your mouth or what you've ever said or thought in your life, but I have to respect you. And sometimes that means that I can disagree with you, and you can disagree with me. Sometimes it means we might be in violent agreement with each other, and yeah, that's great. Like we're all rooting for the Cowboys or the Texas Aggies, right? But we all love blue bonnets. How about that? We all say we all love blue bonnets? All right, that's good, all right. We all agree that we all love blue bonnets. And I respect that about y'all. But the way a leader earns respect is how they treat people, just like Malcolm Forbes said, and by what they do. So I'm reading former HP CEO's book, CEO Carly Fiorina, reading her book about her time at Hewlett Packard and coming up in the corporate world. And she talks about how people, various people she ran into, what made her respect them as a leader, not just as a human, but as a leader, right? Do what I say, not what I do. Does that generate respect? No. So the guy that's coming in at noon, or coming in at 8 in the morning and spending 3 hours drinking coffee and reading the newspaper and then leaves at noon and you don't see him until the next day, I may respect them as a human being. I may not go in there and just be mean to them on purpose, but I'm surely not going to respect them as a leader. So leaders have to be able to put in the time and put in the effort to walk the walk right along with the people they're leading. You can't expect people to do things that you're not willing to do yourself. If you expect your teammates to work long hours on a project, then you better be right there with them. And sometimes for us, in uniform, that means we have to share the discomfort of our employees and of our teammates, right? And for those of us in uniform, that means something different. But do you have to share the discomfort of your teammates if you're a civilian? Yeah, absolutely. If everybody else is eating cold pizza because you're working late hours, you've ordered in pizza, and you go off to Ruth's Chris and get your steak and come back, that's not generating a lot of respect, right? People will respect you for sharing in their hardship. Okay? They also respect you for working hard and being a person of integrity and living up to the values you espouse. Another aspect of respect is understanding the difference between a mistake and a crime. And as a leader, this puts you in a special place because you have to be the enforcer. Crimes are not okay. Mistakes are okay. So let's talk about crimes first because they're easy. If someone commits a crime, it's not a mistake. They may be a decent person, maybe. Maybe they've made a hugely bad choice. But a crime is a crime. Sexual harassment is a crime. Being drunk on duty is a crime, not a mistake. Now, how you deal with that crime is a different matter. That's a matter of justice, the virtue of justice, not necessarily the justice system, although it could be if it's a crime. But recognize that crimes are not mistakes. So let's go back and think about what happened at Penn State a few years ago. It's a little bit of a dated example, but 22 people in the chain of command at Penn State University. Anybody here went to go to Penn State?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to say that the university, I'll start with this since we have a grad here. I think the alumni and the student body did an amazing job of recovering that institution's integrity by the way they responded to that crisis. Because they stepped up, that's what they said, A, this behavior is not acceptable, and B, we're gonna act, do something about it to defend our institution. So I think that the student body and the alumni of Penn State have a lot to be proud of for the way they responded. If you don't know the story, Jerry Sandusky, who was a football coach there, was a serial abuser of young boys. He was convicted of that. He's in jail right now for that. Terrible story. Lots of people knew about it. Lots. The grand jury report said about 22 people in the chain of command had some knowledge of what was going on. One of the assistant coaches caught him in the act. But Jerry's a good guy, and he's got this charity for these kids, and I'm sure it was just a mistake. We're going to defend the institution's honor by keeping this quiet. We just won't let him be alone with kids anymore. That was a crime. And the first person who knew about it should have reported him immediately to the police. That's a crime. That's how you deal with crimes. You go to the authorities and you shine light on it immediately. Because just like a breach of integrity, if allowed to fester, it only makes it worse. And think about the difference in Penn State's reputation if that had happened way back in the 1980s when somebody first found it. Yeah, it probably would have been ugly. Assistant football coach gets put in jail for child molestation. But it would have been the institution who took care of that themselves by going to the authorities rather than let it come out later. And think of all the innocent victims that could have been avoided. That's an extreme example. Most of us don't deal with examples like that, right? So that's a mistake, right? That's a crime. What's a mistake? Well, a mistake is when I give somebody a job to do and they kind of screw it up. Okay. As long as there's no breach of integrity and I didn't perjure myself or I didn't, compromise the government or I didn't, all the things that we get told not to do when it comes to procurement and project management. If you're going to grow leaders to replace us, I'm leaving the Air Force in a year or two. I'm at the end of this. If I haven't grown my replacement, then I've failed. I hope I have. I've tried to. And same goes for y'all. Even if you're brand new to the Air Force, you got to grow your replacement. This is not a lifetime employment contract, and none of us are immortal, and all of us are replaceable. So you've got to grow people in your organization to follow you. And that means letting people make mistakes. Not big ones, hopefully not million-dollar mistakes. But you've got to let them make mistakes so that they grow. And understanding the difference between a mistake and a crime is crucial for a leader. Finally, if you can't respect the institution, get another institution. Life is way, way too short to either be stuck someplace that you can't respect or to be an anchor on the organization or the institution because you're in the back grousing. You're not doing yourself or anybody else any good. So it's good to fight for change. It's good to put forward your ideas, even if you're going against the grain. But at some point, we have to all go find Earth. How many Battlestar Galactica fans in here? Any? Nobody. I have got to stop using this example. One, thank you. All right, so here's the story of Battlestar Galactica. Here's why I say go find Earth. Very briefly, this is a science fiction story. It takes place, supposedly hundreds of thousands of years in the past, but the human race is wiped out by the Cylons, and it doesn't matter why or who the Cylons are. And a small remnant of survivors set off across the stars in a convoy of spaceships led by the sole surviving warship to go find the mythical planet of Earth, to find a new home. And so, there's a scene in the pilot that in the reimagined series, the 2004 series that I love, where Mary McDowell, who played the colonial president Rosalind, looks at Commander Adama, the commander of the warship, and Commander Adama is determined to get back in the fight. He's a wartime commander. He has not yet begun. He's going to go down swinging. And she straightens her suit and she says, I don't know why I'm the one that has to keep telling you this, but the war's over. We lost. And so, and that was kind of a turning point for Adama when he realized it's time to go find Earth. All right. So we're going through some pretty radical change in our Air Force. And we've been through some pretty radical change since the 90s. Think of where we were in 1989, before the Cold War ended, and where we are today, and how much change we lived through. We are still the greatest Air Force on the planet. Nobody else besides us, when the president says, I want you to go do something, can we feed it, look at it, or kill it anywhere on the planet within 24 hours? That's the United States Air Force. That's who we are as an organization. And so what we have to do is go find Earth. We have to live through the change. We have to lead the change we can lead, fight the good fight. But when the war's over and you lose, then you got to move on and go find Earth and fall into the fleet. And so that's what respect for the institution means. It doesn't mean kowtow. It doesn't mean don't talk about what you believe. It doesn't mean don't fiercely advocate for your position. But at some point, you have to either lead, follow, or get out of the way. And so if you can't respect the institution, for whatever reason, good or bad, then go find another institution. Go find some place where you're happy and the institution will be happy, and make room for somebody else. Hopefully that's nobody in here. Because I think we have a fabulous place to live and work, and now that hopefully a lot of the emotion is drained away from this whole Air Force reorganization that we've begun down, hopefully we can all see an opportunity to use our power for good, to really do some things to improve the Air Force. All right, next. Just like Winston Churchill, you can't get by without a good Abraham Lincoln quote, right? So this actually came from, this is true, this is an actual quote, and here's what he actually said this to General McClellan. So the Union Army, 1863, just after Gettysburg, that was McClellan's really his only real victory. But in Northern Virginia against Lee, Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, Lee was a very skilled commander, and he was fighting on his own ground. And so the Union Army was led by a series of very timid officers who were casualty averse, and they were fighting in Northern Virginia, which was enemy territory, and they were fighting against men that they had gone to West Point with. So there was a lot of reasons, good or bad, why the Union Army would go down into Northern Virginia, get their nose bloodied, and then run back to Washington, D.C. to train some more. And so when they were bottled up at one point, in winter quarters there around Washington, training, President Lincoln, Commander-in-Chief, sends a note to his Army commander and said, hey, General, if you're not going to use the Army, may I borrow it for a little while? That's a great illustration of the principle of leaders lead. All right, next one. So let's walk through the takeaways. Next, please. As a leader, what leaders lead, the principle means if you've been given responsibility, then use it. And if you give others responsibility, let them use it. That's how you grow your own. Back to the other conversation we used to have. Don't be a single point of failure. Information's power, right? And so if you want power, you can control the information, and you can be that spigot. What does that do to the organization? I worked for a squadron commander one time when I was a lieutenant, and he was a single point of failure. He was very hands-on commander, and it was very common for a line, and I mean a line of people out of his office down the hallway waiting to see him because he was the only one that could make decisions. And what that introduced into the organization was paralysis. Because nobody anywhere along the chain could make any decision of any size or magnitude. Nobody could move out. They were waiting for the colonel to make the minutest decisions about how we were going to do things. Do you think the airmen and the WG-8 guys on the shop floor, do you think they knew that about their commander? No, of course not. What they knew is that their NCOIC, their foreman, their superintendent, and their ops officer could not make a decision to save their lives and was keeping them from getting work done. So don't be a single point of failure as a leader. Don't be that guy. By the way, he was relieved for an integrity failure. Not once, but 3 of them in a row. We're talking about deliberately developing leaders. You can empower to a fault, but the The goal of an organization is for you to give the appropriate authority at the lowest possible level. That's a resilient organization. And this reorganization that we're going through in our Air Force now puts us in a position where we can do that. And you don't put somebody in over their head. As a leader, you got to support them. But a resilient organization pushes authority down. Finally, the follower skills. You got to be a good follower. So there's a point where you have to realize that you may not be the leader of a given task. Somebody else is. Give them your help. Who's here seen the Caine Mutiny? I love movies. Seen the Caine Mutiny? All right. If you haven't, great old 1940s movie from World War II. What happened was it was a ship captain of a U.S. Navy destroyer, and he ended up having the first officer relieve him. And the crew was acquitted of mutiny on the USS Caine. But at the very end, the defense lawyer comes in and reads them all the riot act, and he said this would never have been necessary if you had supported your commander in the beginning instead of making fun of him. That's what they did. They made fun of him behind his back, because he said, who was the guy back in the 30s when we were all in school, too busy to go into the military, who was defending our country? It was this guy. It was Commander Queeg. So be a good follower. Okay, next please. Teamwork. This is my favorite. This is why it's in the middle. Teamwork. That's G.K. Chesterton. If you've never read G.K. Chesterton, he's hard to read. He wrote Edwardian English. It's pretty heavy, but it's a lot of fun. And what's interesting about Chesterton is two things. One of them is you realize he was an editorialist and a moralist in the 19th century. And he wrote for the London Times. He sparred back and forth with George Bernard Shaw on religion, politics, and morality. And then he also wrote a series of mystery novels called the Father Brown Mysteries. But what's fun about reading G.K. Chesterton is you realize that everything that we're dealing with in the 21st century is not new. It's all the same stuff. So it's kind of fun to read the same sparring back and forth in the London Times between Shaw and Chesterton about moral issues, and then fast forward and read, Krauthammer and somebody else about, you read it's kind of the same stuff over and over again, different words. But I love that quote because that's the essence of teamwork for me. You haven't got time to make all the mistakes yourself. You better trust your teammates and learn from other people's mistakes. So next, please. So rather than going through these particular takeaways, I'm going to illustrate them with a story. So there I was, young Captain Addison at Kelly Air Force Base, commander of the 6968th Alteration Installation Squadron. See, even I have a hard time with it. Alterations, and what we did basically, we built skiffs. We were a classified SCI badged Red Horse team. That's what we did. We went travel all around the world. We built skiffs for the Air Intelligence Agency and other intelligence activities. And so you can read anything into that you want. It was a great job. I really enjoyed it. But that was the age of QAF. Remember Quality Air Force? All right. TQM. And so the Air Force embraced TQM. And so we all went for awareness training, and we all put on our civilian clothes, and we all went to the room, and we all called each other by our first names, and we're going to learn from Toyota, and we're going to learn Thurbligs and all that. I was an industrial engineer with my bachelor's degree, so it was kind of old hat to me. We sort of invented quality, but the graduation exercise was a teamwork exercise, and our task was, in teams of 4 or 5, to make as many paper airplanes as we could. How many of you have done this exercise? A few of you? Okay, good. And so our customer then, we negotiated with them and really put the screws to them to make sure we got the highest possible price. And the guy wasn't very happy because we were really making him pay through the nose for our grade A paper airplanes. And then we went over to our supplier and we really put the screws to him. And he kept saying, I got all this grade A paper. And we said, and we got him down to the lowest possible price. And he wasn't happy. Probably never do business with us again. And so we had very little time when we got our airplanes together. We made as many airplanes as we could, and we lost. We had a box full of paper airplanes. I looked over there. One of the other groups had 4 boxes of paper airplanes. Well, it turns out that if we'd entered into partnership with our supplier, he had grade B paper. What do you think that was? It was already folded in half. It was no good to him. And he would have sold it to us for half price. And then he had grade C paper, and it was already mostly folded into an airplane. He would have sold that to us for 1/3 of the price of grade A paper. And he had grade D paper, which he would have sold to us for pennies on the dollar. Anybody want to guess what that was? Already made paper airplanes, that's right. What we failed to see was we had teammates out there that were not on our team. So that's your goal as a leader, is look for teammates. I'm going to go back to the book I'm just reading. Carly Fiorina was competing, AT&T during the breakup in the 80s, or the 90s of AT&T. They were actually competing for the GSA contract, $20 billion contract. She realized through the procurement process that was very lengthy that if she went for an all or nothing on this, she was going to end up losing the contract. There's very little chance that GSA was going to give AT&T, who had the service and the biggest provider, was going to give it back to them. And what she ended up doing then was partnering with other providers to do and the GSA to do a 60-40 split. Ended up getting the contract and doing all right for her company. Lastly, handwritten notes. I think these are really important as a leader. It really goes to the personal touch, to presence. I won't tell a long story for the sake of time, but I had a general officer take 30 seconds out of his life to write me a handwritten note. Made a huge impression on me, and so I don't write form letters anymore. I take the time, the 30 seconds it takes me to write a handwritten note, I keep a stack of notes on my card. It doesn't have to be a colonel thing or a general thing or anybody else. Anybody can do this. But the power of the personal touch, going to somebody's office and saying thank you, sending them a handwritten note, even if your handwriting's atrocious, is far more powerful a thank you than an impersonal email. You got to use the email or a form letter sometimes. But if you can do it personally, that's better. All right, next please. Finally, little things matter. So the Bell Corporation, you've heard of Bell Helicopter? Okay, that's Lawrence D. Bell, LD Bell. And so this is what he says about little things matter. He says, show me a man who can't bother to do little things, and I'll show you a man who cannot be trusted to do big things. Now, the task, next slide, the task for the leader then is to figure out which little things matter. As a commander, one of the things I always checked was the bulletin board. If I walked into a shop or an office or a flight and I looked at the bulletin board and it was sun-faded because nobody replaced them, or the chaplain or the EO counselor's letter was 2 of them ago, hadn't been updated since 1992. I'll tell a story on myself. When I got to be the deputy when I first arrived at PACAF, I went and took the 1992 PACAF goals off the wall in the front office. This was in the front office. Yeah. So when Captain Brian May and Captain Mickey Addison were there, they were old then. We got there in 94. Somebody, and it's lots of somebodies, over the course of 20 plus years, had never taken the PACAF 1992 goals off the wall. What else got missed in that office? Now, every little detail doesn't matter. You can nickel and dime. I once worked for a senior executive who had no senior executive experience, and she was a wonderful person and very intelligent, but had never been a senior executive before, and had come from academia. And this person spent a lot of time sending cover memos back for editing, that she was the only one who was ever going to see it, because the action memo underneath it was the one that we actually had to send out of the organization. So it would take forever to get things through the office. That's an inappropriate attention to detail, all right? But you have to, so the goal then for leaders is to figure out which little things matter and then pay attention to those little things. And then be willing to adjust to which little things matter based on the situation. And a leader who's engaged, who pays attention, can create organizational change for the good. You can use your power for good. And you can create a team that pays attention to. All right, next please. All right, so that's my talk. I told you I was going to ask you a question at the end, right? So everybody's awake, right, for the question? Here's your question. That's my talk. What's yours? Thank you.